Public announcement, and that's the City Housing Division will be hosting 2 meetings to learn more about the city's housing initiatives and the Rent Stabilization and Tenant Protection Ordinance. The first meeting will be via Zoom on June 6, 2024 from 5:30 to 6:30, and the second one will be hosted in person at the Salinas PAL building from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Translation services will be available for both meetings. To register, please call 831-758-7334 or email the housing web mail ci.salinas.ca.us.
Need affordable housing! Make sure that they pass a rental ordinance that will protect our renter community. So we're showing up right here at the Housing and Land Use Commission meeting. Right now it's about to start at 3:30. We really would like to see the support for our renter community come out. We want to see this rental ordinance pass. We want rent stabilization. We want protections for our renters. Our community is impacted, it continues to be impacted. And if it hurts our neighbors, it's going to hurt us. So we're here. Really love to
We're going to move on to ID 24310, Housing Policy Initiatives Update, an oral update provided by Chris Callahan, our City Attorney.
So thank you, committee members. Just an update on the work that we've been doing on the Rent Stabilization Ordinance. We've had a number of community meetings, and Lisa Brinton will give you some more specific details about the past meetings and the upcoming meetings. But if you recall from our March 26th meeting, we presented with this committee with a preliminary draft Rent Stabilization Ordinance, and there were 3 components which comprised that draft. The first component was the rent stabilization piece, and there were some holes in that, if you remember, because we were waiting on an economic analysis. Lisa's going to give you an update as well on the status of that economic analysis. The second component of those 3 components was the Just Cause Eviction component. That you have on your on the dais, and I'll get to that in a second. And the third component dealt with an Anti-Harassment Ordinance. And we met with the Technical Advisory Committee a couple of weeks ago to discuss that third component. We received some feedback from them on that. I am currently working on revising that and getting that into final form, so at least one of the 3 pieces is almost in final form, so we are on track to meet our commitment to bringing this forward to the City Council for consideration. So with respect to the Just Cause Eviction and Tenant Protection Ordinance, the revised draft I have for you on the dais reflects a revision from the earlier preliminary draft that I presented to you. One of the things that we've heard from the Technical Advisory Committee in the community is why not just adopt AB 1482 and present that to the City Council so that the City Council can enforce that. And what I've heard from this committee is that does not go far enough. And so what we're recommending are some changes to what's provided under state law. And so you have that here, and I've highlighted those specific policy sections which I need some direction on from this committee. So if you look on page 2 of what's on your dais, there's a highlighted number 7. And this relates to properties that would be exempt from the Just Cause Eviction and Tenant Protection provisions of this ordinance. So under state law, housing that has been issued a certificate of occupancy within the previous 15 years would be exempt from those protections. I need some direction from this committee on what you'd like to see. Some cities follow what state law has provided. Others have completely removed that 15-year provision and make this apply to all rental units in the city. And so you may need some additional time to think about it, but that's where I'll need some policy direction on that particular piece. Also on page 2, under just cause required for termination of tenancy. So this sets out which properties or tenants would be subject to the protections of this second part of your 3-part ordinance. So under state laws provided here, it says tenants that have been in that real property for 12 months get the protections from the ordinance. A lot of cities have reduced that significantly. For example, Oxnard has limited it to 30 days. So if you're a tenant in that property for 30 days, you are subject to the protections of this ordinance. Again, another thing that I'll need some policy direction from this committee on. Moving on to your next highlighted section. It is on page, 10. So this relates to the notices that landlords and property owners and property managers need to provide to the tenants. What I drafted in the earlier preliminary draft ordinance was that notices needed to be sent in both Spanish and English. And that's what I'm carrying forward here. I strongly recommend that you require it be in both Spanish and English. We've received a lot of feedback from members of the TAC that the notices should not be provided in Spanish because it does present a financial burden to them. It's an additional cost to their organization. A lot of them aren't able to speak Spanish, and so it's a struggle for them, and so I wanted to make sure that I relayed that to this committee, but again, another point where I'll need some policy direction from you. My recommendation is that we have it in both Spanish and English, but that's for this committee to provide some direction on. Page 11, relocation assistance for termination for no fault just cause. And this provides for direct payments to the tenant. This was in your earlier preliminary draft as well. And it requires that there be a 2 months payment to tenants if they are subject to no-fault just cause eviction, and 3 months if you are a senior or disabled person. Again, this has met with some resistance from some members of the TAC. This is carried forward from your earlier preliminary draft. I'll just need some direction from this committee on that as well, as to whether or not you think those amounts are reasonable and should be in your final draft. On page 12, additional requirements upon termination of a tenancy for no fault just cause. And so this is a provision that was also in your preliminary draft. It requires that if a person is evicted for no fault just cause, if the property is again rented out within the 5 years following the date of that eviction, the property owner, property manager needs to contact that original tenant to see if they're interested in re-renting that property. So 5 years is a long time. There was some concern with the TAC as to whether or not that was too long a period of time. I would recommend that this committee consider whether 5 years is too long and whether a shorter period of time should be given, because tenants do move around a lot, and so 5 years may be a long time to try and track folks down. And I think that was it. So those are the points of this revised draft where I'll need some policy direction from this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll open it up to questions from the committee, and we'll start with Committee Member Osornio.
Yeah, so my first question is, you would like a direction today after today's meeting, is that right?
Ideally, we could get some direction today so that we could provide further revisions to this and move it along. If you would prefer to wait until your June committee meeting, we can do that as well.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, as it relates to the 5 years, did you see any, in any other policies that you were looking at, did you see any different numbers, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and was there any kind of common number there?
It ranges, committee members. Some don't have it at all. Some don't have that requirement at all. Some have 1 year, some have 2 years, some have 5 years. It just depends.
Okay. And so then they would have to notice the, can you go into detail again on that one? I believe that was with, on page 12, with the residential property is offered to rent or lease.
Right. So if it's brought back on the market within 5 years, it requires the property owner, property manager, owner to notify the tenant who was originally displaced as to whether or not they'd want to relet at the same terms and conditions upon which they left. Okay. And so there's also some burden on the tenant to provide information to the landlord of their desire to receive that offer, right? So it doesn't happen automatically. The tenant who has vacated that property needs to provide notice to the landlord, hey, I may be potentially interested in re-renting this property if it becomes available. And they have to do that within 30 days of leaving the tenancy. They also have to give their mailing address and such to the property owner so that they can communicate with them in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification on that. The other question is going to be on number 7 on page 2, housing that has been issued or certified of occupancy within the previous 15 years. Can you give me just a little bit more detail on that?
So again, this is an exemption. So if a house was built or a multifamily residential unit was built within 15 years prior to an effective date that we'll establish here, then it's exempt. And the tenants who reside in that property would not be subject to these protections. They would not be entitled to these protections or to avail themselves of the remedies under the ordinance. This is currently in state law. The cities have authority to do something different than this. They can impose no occupancy period or no construction period. Most of the city ordinances that I've reviewed did not have that provision. They have it completely removed so that all tenants would be subject to the protections.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Committee Member Sandoval.
I know the original makeup of the TAC committee has since changed since it was initially created due to some unforeseen issues, but what is the makeup of the TAC committee at this moment? Are we having, yeah.
I'll defer to Lisa on that one.
Thank you, Councilmember Sandoval. So we have reconvened the TAC. If I could just give a little quick overview about the TAC, and then I'll answer your question about the composition. So we did reconvene the TAC in April because we have a lot of housing policy and programs that we'll be evaluating this year, not just the rent stabilization and tenant protection, but we are also going to be revisiting our inclusionary housing ordinance and want to then be reviewing our rental registration program as well. So in looking at the TAC, we did want to ensure that there was a composition of balance of all perspectives. So when we put together the TAC, we looked at ensuring that there were representatives from all sides. So we kind of set certain numbers, not looking at individuals or organizations, but said, okay, let's have 3 community-based organizations. Let's have 3 like fair housing support organizations. Let's have both private and public and nonprofit developers represented. So we were aiming for a composition of about 13. After having our first meetings, we are revisiting that composition just to ensure that there's balance of the property owners, property management companies, landowners, realtors, as well as those that are representing the tenants. So it is an evolving process, and happy to provide more update.
And what is the participation? Oh, what is the participation, or what has the balance of participation been in the TAC committee the last, have you had 1 meeting or 2 meetings?
So
related to
we
this?
had an orientation on April 30th, and then we had our first meeting on May 15th. Our second meeting is tomorrow. We decided to have hybrid meetings. Our first meeting was virtual, just to bring everyone together, look at the roles and responsibilities of the TAC, and kind of outline and set a meeting date and time. It was decided that virtual, hybrid would work best. Not everyone could attend in person. And so far, we've had good participation from those that signed up or agreed to be part of the TAC. Many of them were part of the TAC before, but we also have new faces because those individuals who served before are no longer in their roles. So we've reached out to those organizations to ensure that there's representation.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. My question is, Mr. City Attorney, it's my understanding based on the ordinance, there are a limited amount of reasons that someone can be I was going to say, there's a limited amount of reasons that something would constitute a no-fault eviction. As I read it, it's basically they want to take the unit off the market altogether, would be one of them, the landlord. The other one would be that they want to rent it to a family member. And then the third one would basically be, or the third one would be if it's being demolished. Fourth one, if there's for some reason, based on a law, they have to vacate the unit or it's no longer hospitable. Are those really the only no-fault evictions that are allowed within this ordinance?
That's correct, committee member, yes.
Thank you. Is that pretty much in line with what most other ordinances are doing?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I think that was the only question that I had actually on this. And also when we're talking about the 15 years, essentially the state says that the ordinance or the protections don't apply to units built within that 15-year time period. Do you see that most ordinances require far less time? You mentioned Oxnard, but have you seen any others?
And most ordinances have that provision removed.
Understood. So it would be within general standard practice for us to also remove that provision if that's the decision of the council?
Yes.
Understood. And in the other ordinances you've seen where it talks about the requirement for information to be given in both English and Spanish, other jurisdictions have also required that to be done by the property owners, landlords, and so forth, correct?
That's correct. And some cities with even more diverse populations require even further translation depending on the language of the renter.
So in your opinion, what you're bringing forward to us is really what's standard practice in most other cities
It's most consistent with the cities that I've seen in California, yes,
that have this ordinance?
that have this ordinance in place, yes.
Okay. Those are all of my questions. We're going to go ahead and open this up to the public. Do we want to discuss the market analysis before we go out?
Yes,
Okay.
Lisa.
My apologies. We're going to have another part of the presentation first.
No problem. So I just wanted to give you an update on, before the market analysis, just a little more information regarding the TAC. So they are meeting biweekly, and each week they tackle a section of the ordinance. So at their first meeting, it was the anti-harassment. Tomorrow we'll be discussing the Just Cause Eviction, and then on June 12th, the actual rent stabilization. Now, in addition, we've been keeping the TAC updated on the technical study that is being prepared by Economic Planning Systems, which is EPS, and they've been tasked with analyzing the potential economic effects of establishing a rent stabilization ordinance. And we received a draft, City Attorney and I received a draft on Friday, which we will be reviewing prior to discussing any findings, information with the TAC. But the objective of their report is to look at existing conditions, what are the socioeconomic and real estate trends that are leading to the city needing to consider this policy for rent stabilization, and looking to other cities and best practices, what they are doing, what has worked, what has not worked, and what are the implications for the city in standing up this type of program, a cost to develop and implement, as well as what are the estimated impacts of different rent stabilization ordinance scenarios on housing supply. And so that entails running some pro forma analysis as to the effect of implementing different sensitivities of a percentage increase on the housing market. And so I also can provide an update on other community outreach at this time, if you'd like me to go ahead and do that, or if you would just like to go ahead and go out to the public.
Do you have, by any chance, do you have any of the findings from the market analysis?
No, not this time. It was just received Friday afternoon before the
Understood.
holiday, so we look forward to diving into it.
Thank
But
you.
it looks like it's a complete, robust study that covered and answered the questions that we asked them to.
Yeah, but you could go ahead and cover the second part you wanted to talk about.
Sure. So just wanted to let you know that, and I believe there are flyers that have been made available. So the city will be leading broader community stakeholder engagement beyond the TAC, which will include a virtual listening session on June 6th at 6 p.m., as well as an in-person community meeting on June 13th at the Police Activity League building. So a save the date flyer has been posted on social media and distributed to over 2,000 individuals who signed up via our housing webmail to receive housing policy notifications. So we'll be sending out a follow-up notice a week in advance as well as days before to encourage participation. You may have heard there are also other community groups that are of their own initiative, having conversations and also inviting the city attorney to participate in answering specific questions regarding the ordinance. These aren't city driven or sponsored, but we are supportive of these conversations occurring and getting the information out.
Okay, we have one more question from.
I know that there was recently a group who met at the PAL building.
Correct.
If there's other interested parties in holding similar community meetings, can the city help facilitate facilities also, or how does that work?
So, yes, we can always receive the inquiry and evaluate that inquiry. In this case, there was a large group of individuals. They had over 90 participants, and they were struggling to find a location that was available that could accommodate them. And so they approached me, and we do, as a city, through our lease, have a certain number of events that we can hold, and we had not used up all of our events, so we decided that that was our way to help support facilitating this conversation between tenants and property management landlords.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Any questions from you, Committee Member Osornio? Okay, and I have no further questions. So we'll go out to the public on this item for public comment.
Hoy estoy para hacer un comentario acerca de la ordenanza, de lo que yo veo y lo que he oído de las comunidades de inquilinos. Sobre su reubicación, por ejemplo, causa justa sin culpa. De un mes, más de un mes, como está la ley ahorita, es de un mes de reubicación, de acuerdo a la cantidad que paga de renta. Y otro mes está bien, pero nosotros estamos considerando por lo menos 3 meses. La razón es que muchos dueños, no todos, muchos dueños están utilizando remodelar su apartamento porque esa familia ya tiene 15, 20 años viviendo ahí y paga menos y ellos no pueden aumentar más de 10%, entonces usan ese pretexto de sacarlos y contratar nueva familia. Entonces, si lo extendemos 3 meses de reubicación, lo van a pensar más. ¿Sí? Lo van a pensar más antes de desalojarlos, porque si están pagando $2,500, entonces va a ser un poco cantidad más alta. Ese es uno. Hay muchos dueños, buenos dueños. Cuando es más de 30 días para arreglarlo, lo que hacen ellos es lo reubican a otro apartamento mientras terminan arreglarlo y después de terminar lo acomodan otra vez con el mismo precio. Entonces se puede hacer de esa manera con los buenos dueños, pero con los malos dueños lo desalojan y contratan a otra nueva familia y de esa manera están trabajando. Yo lo he visto y he trabajado con eso. Gracias.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm here because I want to make a comment about the ordinance of things that I have heard and seen in the community. Mostly about reubication or relocation when it's a just cause without fault. And the ordinance says that they're going to have to give you 1 month's rent depending on the amount of rent that you pay. I think we should be thinking more about 3 months because most of the landlords, what they do is that they remodel the apartment or the home. There's families that have been living there for 15 or 20 years. And the thing is that they can't really increase the rent over 10%. So they use remodeling as an excuse so they can get the family out and then rent out to another family and increase the rent price. But if the reubication amount or relocation amount would be 3 months, they would think about it before they try to get the family out for remodel, because 3 months, let's say that they're paying $2,500, that's a lot of money. So they would think a little bit more before they tell this family to move because of their remodelation issues. And there are some good landlords out there that we should work with them. Some of them, what they do is, like, for example, if they're going to need 30 days to be able to remodel the home. So what they do is that they fix the house and they put the families in another place while they are fixing the home. But there's other landlords that are not good landlords that what they want to do is evict and use remodeling as an excuse.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es María Chávez. Vivo en el Distrito 4, en un proyecto de bajos ingresos. Nada más que vemos familias que ya nuestros hijos crecieron y sus ingresos no los incrementan. Y por eso ya no calificamos para la ayuda. El año pasado, en mayo, recibimos una notificación de aumento. Nos aumentaron 660. Ahora otra vez nos mandaron otro, el mayo 13, de otro aumento al máximo. Todavía no nos recuperamos del año pasado y ya nos quieren aumentar otra vez. Entonces, pido por favor nos ayuden. ya que pues a otras personas están pagando más que nosotros, pero nosotros también con nuestros ingresos estamos también batallando y sufriendo porque tenemos que ver qué cosas compramos y qué no, para así mismo salir adelante. Yo, gracias a Dios, tengo mis hijos y los dos más grandes me ayudan. Pero hay familias que no tienen quien les ayude, sus niños están chicos. Entonces, chicos y unos grandes. Entonces, necesitamos que por favor nos ayuden. Aquí voy a dejar copia de la notificación y de lo que nos van a aumentar ahora este año.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Chavez, and I live in District 4 in a low-income housing. The problem is that my children have grown, and they are making more money, so we don't classify anymore for low-income housing. May last year, we received a notification that they were going to increase $660 to our rent. And again, this year, May 13, they're going to increase it to the max. We haven't even recovered from last year's increase, and now they want to increase it again. So some people don't really have the amount of money to pay this rent. For example, in our case, our income, we're struggling, we're suffering. We have to decide what to buy and what not to buy to be able to survive. In my case, thank God I have the help of my children. But in other cases, families have young children, they're not able to help, and it's hard, we're struggling. So I want to leave here a copy of the notification and the increases that we received for this year.
With regards to the presentation, wanted to stress how important it will be to, if this ordinance can be as inclusive as possible for all tenants of Salinas. We understand that there are due to status or the type of housing that they're renting, it may or may not be protected under Costa Hawkins. But if the city can find a way to work around that and be as inclusionary as possible, as inclusive as possible, we've been talking to a lot of residents, right? Like we've been in direct communication with a lot of our folks who probably have never had attention be placed on them and their living conditions up until just recently. And I know there are degrees of how that engagement, yes, there have been attempts in the past, and the current attempts continue to modify, but I can point to the efforts that we have. We have direct communication with a community that is trusting us to push this forward, and there's a large number of residents that are, have gone invisible and fall into that section, that area of housing that may be exempt from Costa Hawkins. So if really trying to put emphasis around that. And just to the last part around Spanish, the need around Spanish, deep investment needs to be made, because I know that these property owners have a real strong issue around the use of Spanish, and their fear of translating those documents is paralyzing. Thank you for your comment.
Mi nombre es Nidia Soto, estoy con Comunidades Saludables. Tengo tantas cosas que decir, pero me voy a enfocar en los componentes, las organizaciones que componen este comité. Pienso que debería de ser compuesto por inquilinos también, y debería de haber traducción. Y me refiero a esto porque en una ocasión el compañero Jesús de CCA quiso estar presente en esta junta y no fue posible para él y no ofrecieron traducción. Y personas como él y otros más que deberían de formar parte de este comité. Los inquilinos también son una mayor parte impactada por el alto costo de renta, ¿verdad? Entonces quería hacer sugerencia en este punto y también sobre protecciones para inquilinos cuando es una causa injusta de desalojo. Hemos sugerido 3 meses. Realmente no queremos llevar ventaja a nadie ni a los propietarios cuando menos, porque si ellos no desalojan a la gente, injustamente ellos no tienen que pagar nada, pero temen seriamente porque lo están haciendo injustamente. A mucha gente la están desalojando y están sufriendo las consecuencias. Y nadie estamos preparados para pagar $10,000, $12,000 para ir a una nueva vivienda. Y no hay fondos tampoco de parte de ninguna organización ni de la ciudad que pueda apoyar a estas familias. Entonces se van a las calles y eso contribuye a quitarles oportunidades a nuestras familias, que en realidad son familias trabajadoras. Se separan, el esposo se va con su familia, la esposa se va con su familia, los hijos están grandes, se casan. Entonces eso destruye familias. Entonces, por favor, consideren honestamente de parte de nuestra comunidad que eso debe ser puesto en esta ordenanza.
Good afternoon. My name is Nidia Soto, and I'm with Building Healthy Communities. There's so many things I would like to say, but I'm just going to focus on 2. One of them is who is part of the commission, who is in the committee. And I think that in the committee, we should have tenants. Jesus Estrada from CCA, he wanted to participate in one of these commission meetings, but it wasn't possible for him because there was no interpretation. I think that limits participation, and tenants, which is the highest percentage of the people, should be part of this committee. So they're the ones that are suffering the impact because of the increased rent. So I do believe that you should think about how this commission is composed and include also tenants. Another thing that I want to talk about is about protection to the tenants. When there is an eviction with an unjust cause, we really believe that relocation costs should be 3 months, because the landlords, if they are evicting and it's a just cause, they shouldn't be afraid. They don't have to pay anything, but because most of them use an unjust cause, then they have to pay. And this makes the community suffer a lot, because none of us are really ready to be able to spend $10,000 to $12,000 to be able to move into a new home. There's no organizations there. The city doesn't help with these expenses. And this separates families. Families end up in the street. Families end up separating. They can't find a place to live. The wife has to go with her family, the husband with his family. The children are left sometimes in the limbo, or they're older. They have to go live someplace else. So that is something that we really have to think about, so we won't destroy more families.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Juanita Aguilar. Gracias por el tiempo que nos dan de participar en dar este comentario. Solo quiero mencionar, ¿verdad? El pasado 15 de este mes tuvimos una reunión comunitaria con coalición con algunas otras organizaciones, a la cual asistieron más de 250 personas. Sabemos que en la ciudad de Salinas hay mucho más personas que están interesadas en este tema, pero realmente la información que se le dio fue muy buena. La comunidad que estuvo presente se mostró totalmente interesada en el tema. Hay muchas cosas que como inquilinos desconocemos, que incluso hasta propietarios también hay cosas que se desconocen. Pero esta junta fue precisamente para hacer esa coalición. Como ven, están presentes algunas de las asociaciones que estuvieron ahí presentes con nosotros, y traemos en este momento alrededor de unas 160 peticiones que también ellos firmaron, haciendo mención de las necesidades que tienen ellos como comunidad. Entonces, realmente algunos inquilinos forman parte de este comité. Quiero leer, solamente voy a leer una sola, ¿verdad? Pero lo que ellos dicen es: estimado miembros del concilio, necesitamos su apoyo para la ordenanza de estabilización de alquiler y protección para inquilinos de Salinas. La ordenanza debe tener un límite del costo de alquiler del 2%. Esto permitirá que en un futuro familias puedan pagar por una vivienda digna, lo cual ahora es inalcanzable. La ley estatal actual del 10% nos obliga a que personas como nosotros vivamos inhumanamente y que tengamos que compartir techo con 2 o 3 familias, lo cual impacta grandemente en salud, educación, empeora la economía y limita las oportunidades. No se ponga de lado los propietarios corporativos en contra de los inquilinos. Vienen los nombres y los teléfonos celulares y a qué código postal ellos pertenecen. Entonces realmente no los hicimos nosotros, fue parte de la junta, parte de la junta de coalición que se hizo el pasado. Y con respecto a español, creo que sí es importante que se haga en los 2 idiomas, porque
Su
incluso
tiempo ya
nuestra
se acabó.
comunidad tiene no solamente español.
Gracias.
My name is Juanita Aguilar, and I'm here to tell you that we had a meeting on May 15th. It was a meeting with different community members, different organizations. More than 250 people attended. And there was a lot of information that was given in that meeting. The community was really interested in knowing more about the topic. There's a lot of things that the tenants did not know, but there was a lot of things that even the landlords didn't know. So in this meeting, we all got together, a lot of organizations. I bring here in this envelope more than 160 signatures about all the community needs. Because the community, there is a lot of need. One of the main things that we need is to limit the rent increase to 2%. And that would allow the families to be able to live in a house, a decent home. A lot of families can't afford to live in a home. They live in inhumane conditions. Sometimes to be able to afford one house, they have to, 3 or 4 families have to live there. And that really impacts the families, the health, education, worsens the economy and limits the opportunities. And yeah. Oh, so this was filled out by the community members. It wasn't us, but they filled it out. But the petition is, dear council member, we need your support for the Rent Stabilization and Tenant Protection Ordinance in Salinas. The ordinance should have a limit on the rental cost of 2%. This will allow families to be able to pay for decent housing in the future, which is now unattainable. The current state law of 10% requires that people like us live inhumanely, and that we have to share a roof with 2 or 3 families, which greatly impacts health, education, worsens the economy, and limits opportunities. Don't side with the corporate landlords against tenants. Sincerely, the name, the phone number, are you a tenant, and area code.
Thank you.
Mi nombre es Anastasio Pérez Ruiz. Soy un miembro más de la comunidad de Salinas. Yo antes que nada quiero agradecerles por permitirnos escuchar, por abrirnos las puertas para venir a dar nuestra humilde opinión de todas las necesidades que nosotros hemos tenido desde que llegamos de nuestro país. Nosotros no venimos aquí para pedir una vivienda gratis en ningún sentido. Solamente estamos aquí para decirles a ustedes que en sus manos está que cambie por lo menos un poquito, que se estabilice, que ya no nos suban la renta a la hora que los señores propietarios quieren. Es bastante triste este problema de las viviendas, porque pues nosotros los que trabajamos en el campo somos los primeros más afectados en este sentido. Quiero pensar que en muchas ocasiones hemos sido discriminados, hemos pasado por mucho. Si yo les contara todo lo que nosotros pasamos. Yo soy de Oaxaca y tenemos muchas desventajas. No hablamos ni el español bien, imagínense, menos el inglés. Entonces nosotros tenemos las oportunidades muy nulas Imagínense, los señores propietarios, cuando nosotros vamos para aplicar, tienen que hacernos pagar mucho dinero y nosotros sin saber ahí estamos firmando hasta papeles que no debemos. Muchísimas gracias a todos. No se olviden de nosotros. Ayúdenos, por favor.
Good afternoon to all. My name is Anastasio Perez Reese, and I am a member of the community of Salinas. First of all, I want to thank you for listening, for opening the doors so we can give our opinion. And tell us our needs and all the needs that we have since we arrived from our country. We're not here to ask for free homes, not at all. We just want to have a stable rent. We just wanted to change a little bit to have a stable rent and not have the landlord increase their rent whenever they want. This is a very sad situation, especially for us that work in the field. This affects us in this sense. And I think in this case, it's difficult and I'm disappointed because, I'm from Oaxaca and it's really hard for us because some of us don't even speak Spanish well, let alone English. And that really limits the opportunities for us to apply. When the landlord sees us, they just start asking for more money and they make us sign documents that we shouldn't really sign because we don't even know what we're signing. So please don't forget about us and please help us.
Good evening. My name is Olga Reina, and I'd like to talk about the people on Leslie Drive, the Santa Lucia apartments. There's 300 families that are going to be evicted because of remodeling. One of them is my brother. He has two in the family, his sons. One of them is going to go to Soledad to live. The other one is going to Watsonville. My brother will go somewhere else to find a place. That's the effect of what's going on. My brother has lived there for 18 years. His neighbor has lived there for about the same amount of time. His wife just died, and so this neighbor was asking my brother, do you know of anybody that's renting rooms? Because where am I going to go? And he's an older person. So what's going to happen there? So they are pinpointing people that have lived in these apartments for a long time. On behalf of the Leslie Drive tenants, I'm asking you to look into it because that's exactly what's happening. And we do need this ordinance because it's protection about what's going on. We do need them to get relocation assistance. And we're talking about homelessness. There's 300 families that are going to be affected. So there you go. Thank you.
As you know, my name is Sabino Lopez, and I'm working for CCA for many, many years, and in the community for many years, and resident Salinas for more years. So, yes, I want to share last week, I went to a meeting that was organized where the landlords and residents got together trying to interact and probably find some balance or understanding to work together. I think so that meeting was well-intentioned, but it's hard to reach an agreement with the landlords. It's very hard, you know. Let me tell you, and I didn't spoke there, but I want to learn every time I go to any place. I don't talk every time, but when I need, I have to do it. And my experience, what I saw that day, I want to share with you. You know, there was a big lie. They were promoting that event like this is a rent control ordinance, and this is not a rent control ordinance. Watch out. Ellos están organizando, they're organizing their realtors and the owners because they're working against rent control ordinance, and this is not a rent control ordinance. It's two different, and they're scaring all the owners about that, and they're very upset, let me tell you. And they're going to come very upset against, and they're going to use all the power of their money to work against that. So, and you know, it's not fair. They've been raising the rent all the time. And once they hear something about that, they cannot do it. You know, they organize themselves very well and very strong, and they're going to be here next time to show up their power. So just for your information, and it has to be clarified, this is stability ordinance and not rent control. So yes, I want to share that because this, to make you aware, because they will come very
Your time's up. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go out to Zoom.
No comments via Zoom.
Okay, we're going to come back to the committee for final comments and direction on the points of clarification raised by the city attorney. We'll start with Committee Member Osornio.
Chair Rocha, I wanted to know if it's appropriate if I can just get some clarification. I have a clarifying question on.
Absolutely.
Thank you. City Attorney, I'm really going to look to your guidance on number 7 when it comes to the specific date and year. Do you have any recommendations that you would recommend this body as far as kind of when to put in that specific date?
So this is certainly a policy question for you all to make, but as I mentioned before, what I've seen in most ordinances is that this provision has been removed so that the protections will apply to all tenants regardless of their term or regardless of the length of time that their unit has been constructed.
Okay, and so a majority of the ones that you've examined, this is actually taken out?
Yes.
Okay, and then as far as comments, Chair, and then the last would be, again, in just reviewing the different policies that you've seen, on page 12, talking about the residential purpose within 5 years of the date, can you just speak to that again really quickly?
It varies, again, committee member, to 1 year to 5 years. I mean, you need to consider, 5 years is a long time. Is that really reasonable to require someone to reach out and notify a prior tenant 5 years down the road? I mean, I think that's the consideration that as a policymaker you should make.
Okay, and then would it be appropriate if I have it understood, we're going to make the recommendations here, these will then go to council?
Ultimately, the ordinance will end up at council for a final decision.
Okay.
We're just looking to refine some of these provisions so that we can continue our dialogue with the community and with the technical advisory committee.
That sounds good. That makes me feel really comfortable about leaving some things in here just to see if we can refer it to the council, and then we can, instead of recommending something less, but we'll have that authority the council will have the ending authority. So I feel, so as far as next steps go, City Attorney, would it be appropriate to give you step by step or how?
Yes, please.
Okay. So as it relates to number 7 on 2, I would make a recommendation that gets taken out. And then the only other thing that I would like to opinionate on is going to be, I am in support of making sure that these are translated in both in Spanish, that they're accessible in English and Spanish. And then lastly, I would like to make a recommendation to increase from 2 months to go up to 3 months as it relates to C and then AI on page number 11, and then keep the seniors and disabled, leave that at 3 as well. Those are the ones that I would like to state for the record of my support of keeping those.
Thank you.
Do you have any opinions on the length of time for the property owner to contact a tenant?
I was leaning towards 3 years. I think 3 years is a lot more reasonable, but I have concerns about recommending to our council 3 years. I'd like to leave it at 5 and to see what the rest of the body would like to opinion. So I don't want to bring it down. I'd like to leave it at 5 if that's okay.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Is that all on your end?
That's going to be all. Thank you, Chair.
So I want to share with the public, thank you everyone for coming today and sharing your stories and your insights. It's difficult for me as chair to run this meeting because I want to hear everything you have to say and I have to cut you off at 2 minutes. So please know I only do it because I have to run an efficient meeting, but it's something that I take no joy in, and please know that your words mean a lot to me. Councilmember Sandoval had to step off the dais because it's his twin son's graduation today. So he's going to go over to see them graduate today. So wish them all the best of luck in their future endeavors. And as it relates to the items that have been brought forward for feedback to this committee, I would also support having this ordinance apply to all tenants, so removing the certificate of occupancy requirement of 15 years altogether, having this apply to every single tenant in our city would be something that I would support. In terms of the section 02.53 that says notwithstanding any other law after a tenant has continuously unlawfully occupied a residential real property for 12 months. So that requirement of someone occupying it for 12 months, I would support reducing that to 30 days. I think that's in alignment with what most other jurisdictions are doing. I would also support everything being required or what was presented in the ordinance in terms of the notices being required to be in English and Spanish. I would support that as well. And I would also support moving the relocation assistance from 2 months to 3 months. And I want to give more context to that. The truth is that relocation assistance is only going to be given in the event that you're evicting someone for no reason other than you want to give the unit to a family member, you want to take it off the market entirely, or you want to make substantial renovations to the unit. And while I certainly respect a property owner's autonomy over their unit, at the same time, this is a family you're talking about, and you're talking about someone that paid all their rents on time, has been a good tenant, has done nothing wrong, and then from one day to another, they're just being asked to leave. And so the way I see it is, if that is the wish of the landlord, there is a responsibility that comes with that, because you are displacing an entire family in some situations for no reason, really. And as was mentioned by a member of the public in public comment, this can even have much larger impacts at a macro level to where you have an entire, essentially, apartment complex receiving that notice, as we're seeing with the Leslie Drive apartments. And so in terms of a public health issue that is presented to us, I think really ensuring that this moves up to 3 months is critical to ensure that people are not being displaced for no legitimate reason. So I would support moving that up to 3 months. I can support Councilmember Osornio in reducing the requirement to 3 years as opposed to 5 for the landlord to contact the tenant in the future if the unit becomes available again. I think we want to make sure that we allow that opportunity presented, but also making sure that it's realistic in terms of a time frame of holding information to contact someone. So those are my comments to this. I have a question for the city attorney. There was a member of the public that mentioned if there is, for example, you're renovating a unit as opposed to evicting someone entirely, would it be possible for us to put in the ordinance if they have another unit available, that that unit be offered to the tenant first as opposed to evicting them entirely?
If you're referring, committee member, to another unit within that same complex,
yes.
Let me put some thought to that as to whether or not we can do it. I'll follow up on that.
Okay, thank you. Are you okay with that direction? What I outlined in my comments?
I would look to the city attorney's recommendation about another unit at the same complex. I would like to hear more about that. That's where.
Are you okay with everything else that I mentioned? Okay, so.
Now, I would just make a correction, Chair, is that my comments were that I was originally looking for the 3 years opposed to the 5 years. But what I would like to see, if it's okay, if you're in agreement, leaving it at 5 years so that when it gets recommended to the council, we can have discretion at that point to then bring it down to the 3 years if the council sees fit. If
I could support that, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. All of this is ultimately subject to whatever the full council decides to do. And also the economic analysis that Lisa and I need to review may change a lot of this depending on what the results of that are. And so this is the best we have to put forward right now. And when we're done with that analysis and our review of the economic analysis, like I said, things may change and we'll report back to you what changes.
Thank you.
Those are all of my comments, and so we're going to go ahead and consider this report received.